Welcome back, everybody. This is our second of three parts of our judgment on Rolling Stone and their opinion of the top 100 albums. We are just giving you facts, not opinions here. So we're starting with John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. I'm not a big jazz guy, so I don't have a lot to say about this. Kelly?
So, so that's why you wanted to take off leading off. That's great. Um, the so I'm gonna to kind of maybe speed things along. I'm gonna make a proposal that for albums where you just are highly confident that you have nothing to add, which will be a lot fewer albums for you than me. But I think we need to kind of take the example since we become a very litigious society that take the fifth. So you could just take the fifth on an album if you just feel grossly unqualified to make any kind of commentary on it. So you could take a fifth on one that you just say, I got nothing, so that'll get us through there. And then for ones that you have like a vague familiarity with, that you know probably like, yeah, it should be on there. I'm not familiar with where it fits in their body of work. So like for us, I think any Beyonce album might be a good example. Any Taylor Swift album, we can just take the fifth. Excuse me, we can stipulate rather. So I'll stipulate that this should be on the list, and we'll just kind of acknowledge it, but not offer anything. And even though that was a long explanation to say how we're going to pick up time, we'll see how it works out. I do not need to take the fifth, actually, though, on this one. I'm comfortable with it being here in place. Um, it is probably the most saxophone heavy of any of the albums we're going to be talking about. Four movements on this one. It's kind of a different structure than most albums there, but I'm not steeped into all things Coltrane, but I know enough to know that this is good and it's reasonable to have on the list. All right. Um, James Brown. Now I know your POV, and I'm going to PO you later in the show. But your point of view is, well, compilations, live albums shouldn't just be studio albums. It's, I think a little bit your angle on what belongs on this list. So, um, obviously, a Live at the Apollo is going to be a collection of uh, James Brown's greatest stuff, including Think and Night Train. Uh, James Brown's awesome. I'm not going to be able to argue. I guess I'm going to stipulate on this one. Should definitely be on here. Your thoughts?
So I'm not sure how I feel about live albums per se. It's the greatest hits albums. I'm not super fond of being on this list. It feels like a cheat to me. A live album's a little bit different because, especially depending on the live album it is, whether it's a compilation or if it's from a particular show. I'm gonna have to stipulate on this one as well. James Brown should definitely be on the list. I don't know if it should be this album. I don't know enough of the catalog. However, though, I will say, even though I'll use this plead the fifth and stipulate thing, I feel like I have important things to say about every album, whether I'm familiar with it or
Feel free. Just
not.
remember you're under oath.
Number 64, Outcast, Stankonia. So yeah, I mean, this 100% belongs on here. Miss Jackson, I think, was everybody's before playlists were a thing. Everybody was listening to that song. It's definitely their most popular proper studio album, I'll say. And the reason that I denoted that way is technically their best-selling album was Speaker Box The Love Below, which was a double album, but it was actually the two members each did a solo album that were then packaged together as a double album. So technically that's their best-selling album, but it's really two solo albums and each sale counted twice as two separate albums bundled together. So if you exclude that, as a proper group album, this is their most popular release.
I've got to plead the fifth on this one. However, I did in kind of prepping for the show and all that. I'm going to give him props for possibly one of the greatest lyrical lines ever. Uh, Get off us, sir. That that's pretty awesome. So.
And also
Well,
to so for Kelly, Miss Jackson, easily the biggest hit off of this, is dedicated to Erica Badu, one of your favorite artists' mother.
Eureka.
Yeah, Erykah Badu, her mother, because Andre from this group was married to Erica Badu, and this was his message to her mother during their divorce.
Well, there you go. Dan. Asia? Is that how most people pronounce it?
I believe they pronounce it Asia. Yeah,
Um,
that's how I've heard people say it.
that's what I typically heard, but just as going through, it's like from the Midwest, that'd be AJ, or something, but it's not the tip of Asia, not the traditional spelling. Jazzy stuff here, not like it's white guy jazz, so kind of so there's that. So it's more of the Kenny G, not quite, but um huge album when it kind of came out, sold really well. Um I'm not uncomfortable with it being on the list.
Yeah, I'm not going to totally plead the fifth, or I guess I'll stipulate on this one. Steely Dan is a group that was made up of top tier session players that they would swap out a lot of members on each album and things like that. So production and performance wise, these are I know very good albums. Not my cup of tea musically though. But I mean, this was a huge album. I've heard of this before. I knew that people pronounced it Asia. So that's, and I don't listen to Steely Dan. They are named after a dildo from a book though. So there's that.
And not a bad cover either. Kind of
Yeah.
creative. So it's pretty sweet.
Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction.
I know you're
So
pleading the
this is
fifth. Let
Guns.
me fill you in.
Tell me how it is, Kelly.
Oh, go ahead.
So this is Guns N' Roses' full length debut album. It is still this, I believe it says of the 80s, but technically it's still the best-selling debut album. It is their full-length debut, if you want to nitpick, though. They did have a commercially released EP prior to this. But huge selling album. There's so many big hits on it, like to a degree that I don't think you could turn on like a classic rock radio station and not hear a song off of this within two or three songs. I actually don't. It's not my favorite album of theirs, but it is the one with the big like radio hits on it. So if you like that sort of thing, there's too much. People are getting mad at me for saying there's too much cowbell in this album. The guy who played drums on this record loved cowbell a lot. Like you could, I know the famous SNL sketch is about Cloister Cult, but I mean you could easily make it about this record too.
Yeah, and they I always their Blue Oyster Cult lore was not strong in that SNL skit. That
No.
always spoiled it a little bit for me. But they got the look fairly close, but that was about it. Um, yeah, I totally see this. I mean, this is certainly more your area of expertise, particularly Guns N' Roses. But I this is a top 100 album. No disagreement there. Kind of no disagreement with the place on it. Uh, and there may be deeper cuts out there that are better songs than all that, but Paradise City's pretty. When you're talking about good rock and roll songs, Paradise City's pretty awesome. Okay, I take the fifth on Eric B. and Rakim, paid in full.
Classic album of this period. Rakim really ushered in. So rap music prior to this, a lot of it was sort of monosyllabic lyric structures. So polysyllabic rhyming, he really popularized that more in mainstream music. So this album in particular, because it had some hits off of it, was a big shift, and you instantly saw a lot of other rappers try to keep up. I guess. This was almost like a, when the Beatles kind of started, I don't like them, but pretend the Beatles made good records. When the Beatles started making good records and the Beach Boys took that as throwing down the gauntlet to up their game, that's kind of what happened here. A lot of other rappers got a lot more serious about their lyric writing once this came out.
Yeah, Blondie, for example. I think
Yeah. Hardcore street rappers
street
like
rap, like
Deborah
Blondie.
Harry. Blondie.
So yeah, um, I support with the fifth. So um, next to rap, Celtic folk is one of my favorite genres. So I'm all about Van Morrison. Oh, I guess you'd lead off this. Never mind. I took the fifth. I apologize. Mike, your thoughts on Astral Weeks by Van Morrison?
Now he's just stealing everything. Astro Weeks or Van Morrison. So Van Morrison's one of those artists who honestly I don't know like his deep cuts. I just know the hits, and a lot of them are on this one. So this is kind of the album that I know from him. He's also one of those artists, and we touched on this with Kanye West, who will be coming back again on this list. He's one of those artists that hasn't aged well. This has a milk-esque shelf life. Van Morrison is super right wing political guy. Says a lot of stuff that offends a lot of people. So you know, something to keep in mind, I guess, if you listen to this music. I'm all about separating the art from the artist, but this is why I don't like overly political artists because at some point the politics tend to overshadow the music, and that's 100% happened with it.
Yeah, as I mentioned, big affinity for Celtic folk rock. So big fan. Would agree with you on uh, his aging, not aging well on all that. However, if we stay true to our earlier conversation on separating art from artist, good, fair representation to have this on the list. Okay. Stevie Wonder, he's on a couple times on as we get deeper into the list here. Uh, I'm, you know, I'm not steeped in Stevie Wonder's catalog, familiar with it. Obviously, a big name. So I'm a stipulation plus on this because I feel I know a little bit more than just say, yeah, I got to wave it off. What I didn't really have as good a handle on, and it comes out actually a little bit stronger in an album later in the list here, is that um, it wasn't just kind of music with Stevie, that there was more of an undercurrent of a little bit of kind of political, but not the preachy um, political stuff, more clash politics, more, hey, let's get real about some stuff, social awareness, cultural awareness, that kind of stuff. I didn't realize that thread ran through as bright as it does because he does it, I don't know if subtle is the word on it or not necessarily, but he works it in without being preachy for sure. And but also not shying away from issues. So I didn't have as full appreciation of that. That was good to hear. So I am fine with him having a couple of horses in this race in the top 100. Not going to argue with this one's placement. Your thoughts?
Kind of a similar situation where I'm not steeped enough in his albums to say which one should be where. He definitely belongs on the list. He worked a lot with a producer and engineer named Jim Gallagher, who I actually got to work with and learned a lot from. And he always spoke extremely highly of Stevie Wonder. They're good friends, and he always spoke extremely highly of him. So I appreciate his talent and everything that I've heard from him. I just don't know his catalog well enough to say should be this album and this is the right place for it. I just know he should be on here.
And that was the watermelon guy, right? Gallagher?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thought so. It would be multi-talented producer and watermelon destroyer.
All right, at 58, we're just tearing through this one. We have Led Zeppelin 4, which I believe, if I remember correctly, that's not actually what this is called, right? Isn't it Untitled or something, and people just call it that?
I don't think so. It was they called it a rune titled in the description, a rune title, but I struggled with picking up what else it was called there. So we'll go with four.
Yeah. So some people are gonna get mad at me. I don't like Led Zeppelin. Not a fan of Robert Plant's voice, for one. And they stole a lot of riffs and lyrics from things and have been sued many, many times. And they won a couple of them, but have lost a lot along the way and have admitted to stealing from things. And I'm not going to repeat their excuse for that. It's pretty cringe, as the kids would say, though, if you look up why they thought it was okay to steal from certain artists of certain backgrounds, let's say. And yeah, just go look it up and lose respect for them.
Yeah. So I mean, I know them well enough that I don't call them LED Zeppelin, so that's something. Don't call them Eureka Zeppelin, so that's something. But uh, I've just never been a fan. I do think I don't like the vocalist. I don't know that you can respect the guitar work and the drum stuff there, but it just never really connected with me. So I'm going to say facts not in evidence, and might as well tick off a bunch of Led Zeppelin fans and say I got an issue with this on there because you know, I just don't think they're that great. So why am I more scared to say that than express my true feelings on Betty White? I can't tell you, but I am. The band. This is the album titled The Band. Because economy of words. The night they drove old Dixie down is on this one, which is a great song. We've already talked a little bit about them in the previous show, which you should go back and watch if you haven't seen it yet. It's only like 10 hours long, and you can enjoy that as we went through the list to begin with. Um, so I'm not going to really have much to add. Any band with a guy named Levon in it's got is okay by me. Um, uh, Robbie Robertson's solid as well. So I'm going to have to stipulate on this one.
Same. I have to stipulate on this. I like the band. I like the stuff that I know. Not knowledgeable enough to say what and where. Liz Phair, Exile in Guyville. This is an album we talked about already for the best. So she was on the best and worst album list, which we commented on, which was interesting because they're both album covers are pictures of her. So I thought that was an interesting way to do that. But this is a really popular album. This, as we kind of touched on a little bit before with Alanis Morissette, this came out in that mid '90s era of angry female rock music. Again, I hate to sound like I'm giving Alanis Morissette a hard time because I really don't have any problem with her. But this is an example of there were better albums to come out of there. I think the Alanis Morissette one was probably the most commercially successful, so that's the one that pops into people's head right away. But I would argue this is a better record. I would still argue that there were better records even than this. But of that era of music, this is a good place to start.
Which mid-level comedian was she dating and broke up with that inspired this album? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But she did. She made real weird choices later in her career with her music, though. Got into, let's call it experimental music, and alienated anybody who supported her, basically.
Yeah. But a debut, when you debut, this was her debut album, and it was a double album set. So that takes some cojones to kind of say my first one's a double album set. So good for her. Ah, so this one might not be familiar to too many people watching Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Uh, I will argue this should have been higher, not just because it's sales, which is it, but it for whatever Pink Floyd's vibe was that they kind of came up with in the later albums through kind of Animals and Dark Side and Elements of the Wall. Um, uh, there was space rock. I don't know what you would call it per se, but whatever it was, they owned it. It was great. I really think that David Gilmour carried Pink Floyd, much to not the belief of Roger Waters. I mean, Roger Waters, provided the anger and the whatever to kind of and had definitely had a lot to say. But when you just think about Gilmour's guitar work and his vocals, that's the kind to me the quintessential Pink Floyd sound. This is a from beginning to end, this is a great album. It's a wonderful listen. I'd have it higher and not just because of its commercial success.
Yeah, I would put it higher as well. I like Pink Floyd overall. I'm not gonna say I'm the biggest fan in the world, but this is my favorite of their releases, which seems cliche to say because it was so commercially successful, as Kelly was saying. But I mean, it's a really great album. Um, this album to me, so we talked about how certain albums kind of look like what they sound like. This album just to me looks like an old van that smells like weed. That's what I immediately picture with this. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I mean, you don't have to get into that van. But if you see an old van that smells like weed, they have this album in that van.
Probably playing.
They probably play
Yeah. And candy. So, that's a lot of good things to think about there.
it. James Brown's Star Time. So again, James Brown definitely belongs on here. I'm not knowledgeable enough to say which ones, but this is a compilation, I believe, or like a box set. Yeah, 4 CDs. So this
Yeah.
is a box set. Again, I don't think best of type compilations should be on a list like this. Nothing against James Brown, just I want to see what are the best albums.
Yeah, I prefer to take a broader view than Mike's narrow, restrictive, conservative, biased way of looking at these things. And I go, if one James Brown album was on the list a little earlier, when there are four records, it should be higher. So just by math, it's the math. Of course, this is here and should be higher. There's more James Brown. So Jimi Hendrix, also not a stranger to our conversation so far. All Along the Watchtower was on this one. You mentioned earlier that you thought there was better albums. I think this would be one of them. In terms of his catalog. Again, not
Mm.
I'm taking the I'm partially stipulating here because I'm not immersed in Hendrix catalog, but Electric Ladyland, I'm cool with having on the top 100, cool with having it above the previous Hendrix album. And yeah, it seems like a reasonable place for it. He should be in here somewhere. Seems like a good spot. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean Hendrix didn't have a particularly big catalog, so putting I believe all three of his proper studio albums are on this list. That makes sense if you're doing a top 500 to me. Not my favorite of his. I have no problem with this album on here, or even the ballpark of where it's at, so long as the one that I prefer is higher, because that makes me right. But yeah, other than that, I don't have a lot to say about this.
And David Bowie's Station to Station. This was where the Thin White Duke phrasing came from. That which I didn't. I'm not sure why I hadn't made the connection that it came off of Station to Station until now. It's just kind of used to the Thin White Duke terminology being associated with Bowie, so that was kind of a neat little piece of obvious trivia, but still pretty cool. Golden Years, which is, I mean, Bowie's successful stuff, the stuff that were hits and all that. It's just such an interesting variety in what those are. Um, and it's a great sound. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our good friend Brian Eno was part of this is this is all kind of around the whole Lou Reed Berlin, and Bowie and Berlin, all kinds of stuff going, a lot of Berlin stuff going on here in different ways. But this is I think one of the artifacts of a Bowie collaboration, um, and our partnership on some things. So um, no argument here.
Yeah, no argument. I mean, I think Bowie's one of those artists, as we kind of said, who has such a varied catalog and such a large catalog. It's really personal preference of what goes where on here. I would put Low, Earthling, and Outside above this personally, but Golden Years has kind of a special place in my heart. It was they used as the theme song for the Stephen King series of the same name, which I watched when that
Hmm.
was on. So I listened to Golden Years every week as part of that TV show. So I link it to that in my mind as well. So that kind of adds to it. But of of all of his albums, this doesn't rank as high as my favorites personally, but any of them for anybody, it's just personal preference when it comes to Bowie.
That's true. And actually, you were supposed to start that one, and I took it from you. So
I know.
my apologies.
So
So
you can see the
no,
theft happening, people.
that's right. But so we need to stay with the rules. So I'm doing this one, starting it off. Chuck Berry, the Great 28. Mike's gonna get all pissy about. I don't think these got albums young on here. You put 28 of Chuck Berry songs on an album, it should be in the top 100. End of discussion. Your thoughts?
Chuck Berry definitely belongs on this list. Again, though, no compilations. I want studio albums.
Yeah, you're not gonna be happy at the end of this show. Mike, it's your turn to start off.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let me tell you
Jay-Z,
about
The
Blueprint.
Blueprint.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Jay-Z, The Blueprint. This was also on the album covers list. And I think in this particular scan, you can see it a little bit better, but there is a blue tint to it. It's not a completely black and white image. There's a slight blue tint to it. I always like this. The cover though I thought was strong, even though it's a picture of him. This is probably his most popular album, so it makes sense to put it on here. If you're going to put any Jay-Z album on the list, this is the one that makes the most sense to me. The placement seems about right as well.
Yeah, I have to take the fifth on it beyond the fact of just through the write up and some other things, knowing that apparently there was some fairly strong diss tracks on here. So as both the Celtic rock groups and some of the rappers like to do, there's those diss tracks. So things to think about. Uh, Speaking of taking the fifth, we're back to uh uh okay, so I'm not this is great. Why don't you talk about this album by Outkast that's not
Which
Eureka?
which album is that, sir?
This one, uh
What's that title?
Quee Mini.
Sure, I'll talk about Aquemini from Outcast.
Aquemini.
Aquemini.
Oh, Gemini. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. Nope. I think it's a Quee Mini. So, see,
That's where you're
you
going
didn't
with.
take the fifth.
So my introduction to Outkast was the album, I believe it was the one directly before this. It was AT Aliens. But Aquemini is a great album. This was probably for a lot of people, probably the first one that they got into. Because if I remember correctly, this is the one that has Rosa Parks on it, which was a gigantic hit for them. And real life Rosa Parks family was not happy about her name being associated with it. But the song Rosa Parks was a giant hit for them. So this is a really good album. I don't know that I would put this before Stankonia though. I I get them both being on the list, but I would switch those. You, sir?
Well, I took the fifth. This was mine, and I took the fifth
Oh, that's
immediately.
right.
I took the fifth, and then you still made me say the name wrong. So,
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about Exodus by Bob Marley? Everything pronounced correctly. Go right ahead.
Bob Marley and the Wailers, Exodus. So I'm a big Bob Marley fan. Um, I don't know when I started listening to Bob Marley, but I was really young. Like I just kind of always remember being a Bob Marley fan. I'm so happy. I don't know that this is my favorite Bob Marley record, but I'm so happy that it wasn't just a greatest hits record at this point on here. Because so nothing Legend is the album that you always see in the top part of best album lists, which and it's a great album, but it is a greatest hits album. It's a compilation album. At that point, though, I think particularly in America, he wasn't that well known yet. And that was kind of what blew him up here was a compilation record. So it makes a little more sense when that's on there, but it's always nice to see not a compilation album of Bob Marley in a top part of a ranking like this.
Yeah, although you'd think with like One Love and jamming on it that it is like feels like a greatest hits because those are a couple of the big
Mm.
ones. So on that, I also not being steeped in all things Whalers, did not realize one, there had been an assassination attempt on Bob Marley, and two, Exodus was the conversation around, hey, I'm getting out of, I think it was East Texas he grew up in. I'm leaving East Texas and moving to London. So, but got to move in there. So that was some interesting backstory as well. The Ramones, English punk, American punk. Who started it? Who did it better? Many arguments to be made, but you can't beat the frenetic energy and just kind of not earnest, perhaps not layered thinking in Ramon songs, but passionate and great and awesome. And top 100 album, no doubt. And they're in the top half of the top 100, which I wouldn't argue with as well.
Yeah, I don't argue with the album or the placement other than to say personally, never mind the bollocks would be above this.
And there's another group that I'd place above both of them. We'll talk about them later because they were appropriately placed.
Paul Simon, Graceland. Paul Simon, well-known death metal singer, very guttural vocals, dark, violent lyrics. Kelly, your thoughts?
So I mean, this marked his transition because the dude, he's limited in ability. So he always has to pair himself up with someone to carry that. You should be familiar with this concept. Someone with like just like a little grain of talent sees a bright star out there and they just find a way to attach themselves to it. And so that's what Paul Simon did with Art Garfunkel. And then, of course, Graceland's noted for that same level of partnership with Chevy Chase. So I've always liked the craftsmanship of Paul Simon work. He, much like Peter Gabriel, and I think Gabriel beat him to it on this, became very interested in some of the African, pulling in kind of more Africanized music into doing a bit of a fusion with there, which is always to, uh, Paul Simon's not British, but he sure looks British. And Peter Gabriel is. And so when you see these highly white colonialists um, uh, genuinely kind of pulling in the African music and participation, there's always just a little clang for me on that. But they both do it so well. Uh, I'd argue Gabriel does it a little better, but Paul Simon's a very talented guy. Um, not a lot of not much of his typical death metal on this album, but a pretty fun listen. And
I am more genuinely a bigger fan of Simon and Garfunkel as a combo than Paul Simon. And if you want white guys borrowing from Africa, you can't beat Toto's Africa.
that's fair. That's fair. Um, So Simon and Garfunkel over Simon and Chase too. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And
Let's
my
go.
my this is weird. I think my true introduction to Simon and Garfunkel was Art Garfunkel in the movie Boxing Helena.
Oh, yeah. I just don't think when he was picking to change his name for becoming a big star, I think he chose wrong. I think he could have done better than Garfunkel, but
Did you
that's,
did you see the Weird Al biopic
I did.
and where where the Dr. Demento character is like, we need to change your name instead of Al Yankovic, Weird Al Yankovic. That's the Art Garfunkel moment for me.
Yeah, no doubt. So I'll get out of your way on this one. Uh, I'm not going to argue with Prince. I don't need to stipulate. I can kind of speak to a little bit sign of the times. Did follow. I mean, so this is kind of post Purple Rain. So I'd be very interested in kind of your cut on it. I think Purple Rain obviously had the movie, all the attention. It was really kind of his breakthrough to a broader audience. I think this is a better album. Um, and I certainly think he's an artist of such ability that he absolutely belongs in the upper half of the top 100. But my input pales in comparison to whatever Mike is about to say. So go.
So I feel like so I love Prince. I'm a huge Prince fan. Much like David Bowie, he's got a huge catalog, a lot of varied stuff on there. There's Prince albums that are literally just him singing and playing acoustic guitar to albums he did with a full orchestra. So and everything in between. So just crazy amount of variety. I think the reason that this album usually winds up on lists like this, not because it isn't a good album. I like this album a lot, but I think that this is an easy one for critics to kind of gravitate towards because he commercially hit his height definitely on Purple Rain, which sold millions and millions of copies. But his albums prior to this were very focused on using shock value to get attention, with lots of song titles that I can't even repeat here. And I think that this was viewed at the time as a slightly more mature album. And I think that that's what makes critics kind of gravitate towards this because you could definitely, the musicianship has always been there from his very first album. Just an excellent musician, plays almost everything on his albums, produces everything, writes everything from the time he was a teenager when his first album came out. But albums like Dirty Mind and Controversy were the ones that really started to get him attention because of using fairly sexually explicit lyrics for the time. Nowadays, they might not be as shocking, but for the time, it was pretty far, some of that stuff. So this was a little bit more mature and socially conscious. So I think it was easier for critics to kind of be like, oh, go listen to this. This is good. Than for them to recommend a song like,
Thanks for the edit opportunity. So
you're welcome, or Sexy or Let's,
get it out of your system.
all Prince songs.
Okay. All right.
There's a few more I could go through, but I won't make it too hard. Okay.
Okay.
Nas Illmatic. This was on the album covers list. This is one of the few times of a kid or baby that I like the use of it. So it first off, it is Nas, and it's a double exposure of him and the housing project that he grew up in. This, if you're a rap fan, is such an important album. He was young when this came out, and it's a very rap music at the time was really becoming mainstream. And part of what was really pushing it was collaborations between artists, which was smart. But what was happening was you would get albums, especially from newer artists, that would be just filled with collaborations. And some people would complain that you don't hear enough of the artist. But the flip side of that, of course, with a newer artist, it's easier to sell them collaborating with an established artist. So this was kind of unique in that there is one other person who appears on this entire album. It's on one song, it's AZ, and he wasn't even known at that time. So the only collaborative track on here is with someone who was also a pretty new artist at the time. So this was kind of a big deal when it came out. This album is incredibly well respected, rightfully so. He even re-recorded this with an orchestra later in his career.
Oh, very cool. Fifth. So, and so another one that we've talked about this album cover. Another one I'm going to plead the fifth. So, um, why don't you talk to us about Tribe Called Quest, Mike?
For me, this is Tribe Called Quest's best album. I'm not a huge fan of theirs. They're a little more jazzy and socially conscious than the stuff I was listening to at the time, which was definitely NWA, Snoop Dogg, that kind of stuff. So this is a little more jazz influence, a little more socially conscious, but this, in my opinion, is their best album.
Radiohead, OK Computer. So I just want to read the beginning of this description for the folks. Radiohead recorded their third album at the mansion of actress Jane Seymour while she was filming Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Wow. So these were connections I didn't know. Are these Jane Seymour's children? Radiohead? I don't.
No, yeah.
Were they all banging Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman? I don't know. I don't want to know if that's the
Poor
case.
Jane Seymour.
Not my medicine woman. So keep your filthy hands off my medicine woman. Um, so I guess within their existing capabilities to be experimental, this is one you're getting into more of a different, or a more adventuresome Radiohead on this album. Um, I'm going to. I'm not going to stipulate. I just can't. I'm not going to plead the fifth either. I'm just kind of going to go. I'm not sure this should be on here. I don't have a ton of backing on it beyond. Um, we've passed a lot of other people getting to this record that I would have ahead of this record. So that's where I'm going to stop. That's where I'm at.
A lot of
That's,
people love Radiohead.
yeah. And I took another one of yours, didn't I? How about that?
Yes, you did.
Jeez.
Um, a lot of people love Radiohead, and that's fine. They're not my favorite band. I'm a huge fan of their drummer, Clive Deemer. He played on one of my songs. Great guy. Um, Huge fan of his drumming, particularly his drumming style. More so from his other project, though, Portishead. He's in both head bands. But Radiohead, this was a big turning point in their careers because they were kind of like these indie alternative, you know, critical darling band. And this was the first time they really kind of embraced technology and electronics at a time when it wasn't good for people's careers in rock to say that it was okay to do that kind of stuff, which is literally why it's called OK Computer. It was them embracing technology at a time when it wasn't cool for rock bands to do that. So I do give them credit for that. Radiohead's music has never, I'm not the target audience for it, is what I should say. They have certain songs that I like. This just isn't my kind of music in general, though, which I've said to Clive Deemer of Radiohead, so it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Don't share any of the medicine women theories that I put out there with it. Although I'd like to know. So, um, would you, so we get back on even ground, would you like to take the lead on the Rolling
No, no,
Stones?
no, sir. No, no. I
Okay.
won't steal spots
Okay.
from you.
You're a better man than I. Um, Let It Be Bleed. I don't recall Let It Bleed being on the greatest album covers. It's a pretty good album cover. Pretty cool album cover. Um, we all know Mike's a much big Beatles fan versus Stones fan, so probably gonna have to eke out any faint praise he's gonna have for this. This is to me the Stones at their most Stonesy. Give Me Shelter and things like that, and the Stones at their most Stonesy belong in the top 100, belong in the upper half of the top 100. Midnight Rambler's also on this as well, but I'm good. I am totally good with this one.
I'm fine with this album being here. I'm fine with the placement of it. Um, our mutual friend Vex hates the Rolling Stones. He always says, and I don't think he's necessarily wrong. It doesn't make me hate them, but I don't totally disagree with him either. He always says that the Rolling Stones have written like 10 or 12 of the greatest rock songs of all time. But the Rolling Stones have written like 1,000 songs. So on average, it's not great. Um, so that's always been his reason behind hating the Stones. But if you're gonna even if you're gonna go that route, Gimme Shelter is one of those greatest rock songs of all time, in my opinion, and that's on this album. So it's hard for me to argue the album or the placement. Personally, and this is one where I'll throw a live album, maybe. I think the Stones live albums are a little bit better than their studio records are. And particularly, they have an album called Flashpoint, which is not on this list, and I would have put that over any of their studio records personally.
Around what time frame did Flashpoint come out?
I want to say early 90s, late 80s,
Okay.
early 90s.
Yeah. This is you.
David Bowie, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. So I think for a lot of people, this is kind of the go-to greatest Bowie record. For a lot of people, it's the one that I always see mentioned the most. And while I do really like it, again, I would put Low and some other things ahead of it, even though that's going to be much less popular in opinion on this one than it was on the last one. I do really like this album, though. So it's not to disparage this. I just think Bowie's great. I think most of his albums are really good. And I think you could swap out almost any of them on most positions on this list.
Can't argue with anything. It is the kind of the safe pick. um, uh, uh, to do in terms of Bowie's. I get it's like this kind of culmination of definitely on the I mean everything from Bowie's creative, but definitely creative upswing on this one, but a marketable and commercially successful job on it too as well. So uh, not a single quibble with that placement there. Uh, and so the Svengali of Brian Eno returns and working with these young upstarts, the Talking Heads, on Remain in the Light. Um, I can't remember where you're at on the Talking Heads. I like the Talking Heads, but I think a little bit even like Warhol, there was sometimes I think a little more um, people attributed a little more high level creativity to their output when sometimes it was just uh, a much more spontaneous creation. I remember seeing an interview with Bowie where he was or Bowie when talking as David Byrne when he was talking about, oh, the lyrics were burning down the house. How did you come up with it? And it was they had the track down, and then he just kind of started making noises. And then started to go, oh, I can string maybe that sounds like burning down the house. So sometimes there's a little less art in that than in that. It does start to get into funk. I mean, there's white as much as a bunch of white people can get into funk type of thing. So there's some things there, but I've always liked them. I do think they're creative. I think they'd sometimes get maybe a hair more credit for their creativity than I don't know if they're brilliant, but they're certainly very, very good. And I'm not gonna argue with the placement of this in the top 100.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that Kelly said. Like Talking Heads. This album makes sense to me. I can't really argue with them being on here, even really the relative placement of it. And I also think they are one of those bands that I think people project things on sometimes to what Kelly was saying. And I do think this is one of those bands that happens to. The difference, though, I think that happens to the Beatles all the time. The difference is I would listen to the Talking Heads on purpose.
Yeah. Yep. Much like Blue Oyster Cult's called Thinking Man's Heavy Metal. The Talking Heads are Thinking Man something.
And 91 for Flashpoint. I just looked it up real quick.
Okay. Cool.
Bob Dylan, Blonde on Blonde. Um, I'm gonna stipulate on this one because I don't know Dylan's catalog enough to say it should be this album here, but obviously Dylan belongs on the list. So stipulate on this one. You, sir?
I'm stipulating as well. It was interesting to read, and I'll see if you refute this or not. The write-up in Rolling Stone, who we've already established has been wrong on some things, on their rankings. So not a trustworthy source, maybe fake news, who knows? Um, but they said this was actually the first double LP by a major artist. Um, 1966.
Could be. That might be. So there's a lot of arguments over double albums and what that really means in the vinyl era because vinyl held a lot less, and also different types of music, and how not to get too far into the weeds, different types of music took up wider grooves. Like bass heavier music was wider grooves, so a bassier album held less on each side. So something like Dylan, which is more folky, which is going to have narrower grooves just by the nature of the master of the record, you're going to be able to fit more content on there. So there's been actually a lot of arguments about this. The one thing everybody does agree on is that the first double album CD was Guns N' Roses. Their second album, Use Your Illusion, which was actually originally released as two separate CDs that you had to buy separately. Because when they were making the transition, all artists, when they were making the transition from vinyl to CDs, regardless of what you could fit onto a vinyl, suddenly a CD could hold more than a double vinyl could, regardless of the type of artist you were. So most double albums were now a single CD. So Guns N' Roses set out specifically to make something that would fill multiple discs up. In fact, they wanted it to be four CDs, and the record label had to intervene with that because the cost of it would be so high, not just the manufacturer, but the cost to the public buying it as well. That it came out as a double CD initially, where you had to purchase the two CDs separately, and both of them were over an hour.
Okay. Yep. Um, so we know factually for sure they're the first double CD. We'll have to leave the other one open. Um,
Yeah, that I don't know just because all the arguments.
so I would not, I don't think he's a real doctor either, by the way, coming up here.
We're
So
both that we went to medical school together.
yeah, I bet you did. So I'm gonna take the fifth on your partner in fake doctorhood, Dr. Dre, and have you share some of your med school stories and your thoughts on the chronic. Which I guess
I
there you go. He's trying to cure illness. Clearly, it's a chronic illness. I guess,
yes.
I'm starting to see perhaps. No, I'm not. Go ahead.
So the Chronic is one of my favorite albums of all time. If I was forced to do a top albums list, this would be top 10 for sure for me. This is rap's pet sounds. This is where rap music took a dramatic change from this point forward. So Dr. Dre actually has been a part of kind of hip hop culture from nearly the beginning. He was in a group called World Class Wrecking Crew, who were basically like a disco group that had some rapping in there. Eventually, he left that and was one of the founders of NWA, which took rap in a grittier, more harder edge direction. And then when he went solo, this was his first solo record. He's more of a producer, though. While he does rap, he doesn't write his own lyrics, as everybody knows. He's more of a producer. So when he was making his solo record, he needed somebody who could be kind of the front man almost, if you were to think of it as a band, while he focused on the music. And musically, this was a huge change because you had early rap was definitely more steeped in like dance music and disco and things like that. Then you had the gangster rap era of NWA and Ice-T and stuff like that, which was more sample based, a lot harder edged, grittier kind of sound to it. He went in a really different direction on his first solo record, where it's really kind of a mix of like samples of old R&B and funk records along with live music, and definitely a smoother, less choppy kind of sound than rap music had to that point, but he really needed a front man for it so that he could focus on the music. There's even a few songs he doesn't vocally contribute to at all, even though it's his face and name on the front of the record. So his front man was actually a really young kid who was a friend of his little brother's, and that was Snoop Dogg, who was completely unknown at that time. He became sort of the main vocalist on the record, and obviously he became a huge star off of this record. So it not only did it kind of change rap, but musically and production wise, this was just light years beyond anything that was coming out of the genre at that time. So it's a huge, huge record, and it gave the world Snoop Dogg. I heard Snoop Dogg has great taste in rock bands
Have you
and
now?
is collaborating with one.
That'll be interesting to see. It's probably Blondie. So uh,
It's Blondie.
I fifth out of Dr. Dre right away. So
Yeah. I was trying to think of how to start. So Michael Jackson off the wall. Um, so it's hard to argue with Michael Jackson being on any kind of list like this. This isn't the one I would choose, but hard to argue with him being on this list. Separating the art from the artist, things not aging well, all of that comes into play here. Obviously, Michael Jackson was on trial for things that we can't say on YouTube. He was not convicted of that, but there were numerous accusations throughout his career. He also said some things in a couple of songs that got him into trouble because they were anti-Semitic, and he eventually went back and censored those songs to remove those lines from it. But so, I mean, there was controversy on multiple fronts related to stuff with him at different points in his career, and then his being a parent later in life and some controversies that came out of that. So I mean, he's definitely one of those people where the art and the artist are tough for some to separate. Um, Personally, this isn't the album that I would choose if I was going to put Michael Jackson on this list. It's super cliche, just like Dark Side of the Moon, but it'd really have to be Thriller, which I suspect we're going to see later anyway. But if I was going to put Michael Jackson on my list, that's the only one that would pop up on there. You, sir?
um I think probably both of these need to be one of them has to be, and I think it's obviously Thriller needs to be in the top 100. I think this belongs in somewhere in the mix of their top 500. I don't know if he needs two placements on there, but you can't argue with the commercial success of this stuff. And it is, I mean, the album's worth buying to kind of see this is what the guy actually looked like, which is kind of nice.
Before he aged so gracefully.
Yes, before, yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, what can you say? Of course, this is definitely in the top 100. I don't know. There's a lot of other candidates that might nudge it out of there, and it certainly has a partner album that is higher and should be.
And my wedding was officiated by the guy who played the Michael Jackson rip from the headlines equivalent in Law and Order.
There you go. Yeah, a man that has no ability to recognize faces, by the way, just so you
Well,
know.
one face.
Yeah, there's one face that he didn't recognize. That's for sure. Um, okay, I know Mike's been itching to talk more Beatles, so um, this is when they kind of get out of their mop top, suit wearing kind of stuff and get all creative and stuff. Um, Norwegian Wood, I believe, is on this one. I'm a little torn because I don't want to say anything nice about him, get you all mad. Um, uh, I do, and again, it's maybe. I mean, I really don't listen to enough of the Beatles stuff, top to bottom, to kind of rank some stuff. White Album is probably the one I've maybe listened to the most outside of Sergeant Pepper, and mostly my increased Sergeant Pepper listening is because Alice Cooper played Father's Son in and sang "Because" in the hit Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie starring the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton. Um, so that's why my Sergeant Pepper's is a little higher there. Um, sure, be on the list. You don't belong up this high, I don't think. There's too many of you Beatle albums. Get out of my face. But all right, you want to put it on, Rolling Stone. You're bound and determined anyway. So, and I don't like it. So I object. Your thoughts?
No, the Beatles don't belong on here. If you're going to mention a Beatles album, I guess it would be this one. If I remember correctly, and I'm not steeped enough in Beatles lore to say, but I believe this is the one that started the kind of creative feud with the Beach Boys, which pushed both bands, one of whom was way better than the other one. So I guess if you want to mention it somewhere on the list, that's fine. But I wouldn't personally put it in my top 1,000 albums.
Fair enough. The last one that we will discuss this show.
Stevie Wonder, Inner Visions. I'm just going to defer to what I said about Stevie Wonder the last time. I don't have anything else to add.
Yep, and ditto for me on that too. And then again, just a little bit more of the social awareness and thoughtful stuff kind of worked in a very deft, non-preachy way. So no arguments for me on him being on here again. And so, but somewhat having to stipulate. All right, we made it through another batch. Only 33 more to go. But before we leave you today, we did want to um, say so we have thoughtfully and painstakingly reviewed all 500 albums in this list, mostly eagerly searching for things we wanted to have on there. And we came out disappointed in multiple cases. We shared some of that disappointment with you last show. We're going to do that again this show. So, do you have, we've talked about what's on the list. Is there something that, whether it's in the top 100 or top 500, is there an album you would like to say for this show you're disappointed was not included?
Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed there's no Alice Cooper on here.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that for the counter on the show last time. How many times we expressed our dismay. Yeah, because I think I know of two that and I'm just giving one out as a sympathy vote to you. I know of one for sure that needs to be on here. Maybe this other guy could tag along, but did not have them even in the top 500. That's crazy. So,
Insanity.
so, so I assume, okay, so you're gonna, uh, you know, I think I know the album you want to say. So if there was going to be an Alice Cooper album on this list, you would like,
I would first choose Love It to Death, and then a close second, I would concede is Billion Dollar Babies.
no raise your fist and yell though, huh?
No, no.
No, that's fair. Yeah, and just tick Mike off. I'm gonna complain about a compilation album not being on here, and the uh, the Beast of the Bonzos, Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. So I became aware of the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band when I went into a record store. That's where they used to. That's hard copies of online music kids. Vinyl, although I guess vinyl people kind of know now that, so we don't have to quite do the explanation on that like VHS. Um, but there used to be these things called cutouts when people would make a lot of an album that they thought was going to do great, and then for whatever reason, it just didn't sell. They made too many copies. There was a problem with the inventory, and so they would drastically reduce the price of these albums, and they would be kind of in the back row of a record store. You go back to the cutout section. It's usually pretty ample, pretty lot, quite a few things there. And the reason they were called cutouts is that to kind of not allow because the manufacturer, the distributor at this point was dropping the price down low to get their inventory gone. They didn't want the record store selling it at regular price and making a killing on it. So they said we need to kind of somehow signal to the public, but not tell them we're doing this. They'll just have to figure it out, a cutout. And so what they would do is they would take a large number of these albums and a bandsaw, and they would either cut a little slot in all the covers. So you take a stack of 20 albums and just have a little slot that ran through there. Something's cut out there, or sometimes they clip the corner off. Um, Beast of the Bonzo was in the cutout bin, and so I just looked at the cover. Oddly enough, I'll see what I can do. The cover that is now on the internets for Beast of the Bonzo is not the cover of the album I have. The track list is exactly the same, but it's an entirely different cover. My cover is a lot cooler, so if I can't find a copy of it, I'll just take a picture and include it as well. But it covers kind of the entire of the various iterations of the Bonzos, and then as they kind of separated and it got back together and did some things. Neil Innes, who did a lot of stuff with Monty Python, Vivian Stanchel was huge in that as well. Um, I just think it's a fantastic album, very representative through their entire career, and a group not well noted. In the separating the arts from the artist category, there are a few videos on YouTube that are poorly thought out. So there's a monster, the monster one. Oh no, there's a monster. Don't watch that. Don't don't. Um, but they're just great. They're super fun, super creative. Um, I don't know if we did track for track on the Beast of the Bonzos or not, but trying to remember back. But good stuff. So I was disappointed that the Bonzos, and realistically, the only way they would make it on this list is on a compilation. I think that would have to be, you're gonna have to collectively do something there. But I wish that was on here and it's not. So, all right. I think this fifth, taking the fifth and stipulations, helping us get through this stuff quicker. So that's good. Not that we don't enjoy spending time with you. I'm sure you enjoy spending time with us. And if you want to spend more time, please subscribe to the Bog Panda YouTube channel. Hit that bell and you'll be notified when new and entertaining things come out from Mike and I. Anything else for the second, third?
No, no, that's it. Obviously, you guys come back, check out the other part of it as well. And then we should do like a compilation video that's, all 4 hours or whatever it's gonna
Yeah.
end up being.
Yeah, that'll be easy listening for you to go to sleep. So yeah, I think we'll definitely put that together. All right, thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bog Panda.